What's up, Rovers? Today's video is about Yinlin and Yao's rerun banner that should be coming in the back patch half of 1.4. Should you pull? With Rinascita dropping right after New Year's for version 2.0. I've been getting this question a lot lately, and hopefully this video can answer all of your questions. First of all, if you want to pull because, well, you really like the character, then by all means pull. Having fun and enjoying playing the game always comes first, and Wuwa is no exception. Yao is a stellar DPS with a very unique kit that doesn't exist in the game so far, and Yinlin is a solid all-purpose sub DPS that can fit in almost any team regardless of composition. But if you want the nitty-gritty, then look no further. These two units fall into two well-defined archetypes, main DPS and sub DPS. Let's talk about Yao's situation first. Now, if you were fortunate enough to grab Yao for free during version 1.2, I'm sure you've noticed how he's much more than just the shiny new Calcharo. Yao's first impressions were an easier to use Calcharo with better damage, but he turned out to be much more important than that. Months after release, he's proven himself as a noteworthy DPS not just because of his damage, but his ease of gameplay for mobile players in casual content and massive quality of life aspects. He has time stop, time slow, massive AoE, mobility tools, and hyper armor during his biggest casts, as well as easy simple rotations that easily also overcap on Concerto needs. To put into perspective, fights like this, where even GN's grouping does not apply, Yao clears them with ease even on entry builds due to completely disabling Ice Wolves and other crowd control resistant enemies. He even time stops and slows bosses, so nothing has resistance to him. His only drawback is his damage ceiling, since he's so simple to use that there isn't much tech to increase his DPS in high effort play, but there is no currently known content that Yao fails to excel at, because any well-built 5-star can clear everything DPS wise. The question comes down to ease of use for the average player. For those looking further, he is still a top tier quickswap DPS due to the sheer amount of backswap windows in every Law of Rain setup and skill casts. If you haven't built your Calcharo yet, Yao would be an excellent Electro DPS choice that lasts due to his enormous utility. Otherwise, if you're perfectly happy with your Calcharo and don't need better crowd control with a forgiving playstyle, then you may look towards Rinascita for more elemental diversity in your roster. My best guess is Carlotta being Ice DPS based off of her signature gun design, her motif, as well as other elements on her, and being the last main DPS element not covered by a banner unit yet, as Fusion is technically covered by Quickswap Xiangli. Let's talk about Yinlin's banner next. Her main niche is functioning as a massive electro liberation amp for your main DPS. Now, this perfectly fits Yao and Calcharo at the moment. Her secondary role is providing excellent coordinated damage as a sub DPS. This works in every team and also serves as a forte bar speed charger for Jinshi's nukes. However, things are not as great as they seem. For ranged, fast-moving, or flying enemies such as Phase 2 Fallacy, Yinlin can struggle to hit them due to travel time of her puppet and hitboxes. Jocha, for example, does not have this issue due to spawning her hitboxes directly on top of the enemy, and thus is a better suited companion for evasive enemies with Jinshi. However, Yinlin has far greater AoE potential on enemies she successfully tags with her punishment mark. Therefore, Yinlin works best on less agile enemies or packs of trash mobs. But there is another issue. All of Yinlin's best teams are matched or surpassed by replacing her with a dual DPS setup. Now, while Kuro has foreseen and clearly tried to rein in dual DPS quickswap ever since Beta 2, with most outro effects expiring on swap, it still has resulted in coordinated DPS being overshadowed due to players finding ever new tricks and better rotations to make quickswap work, especially over the last few months, and even in Yinlin's own respective best teams. Based off of this, it seems like I would advise to not pull for Yinlin since it appears she's replaceable. However, that's also not a clear case. Rinascita arriving with 2.0's game's overhaul, and if you look at all the echo sets in the game, we have one for each occasion, every element, every role, except specifically the coordinated damage sub DPS niche. The only sub DPS set that exists is Moonlit Clouds, and it's a set shared by both dedicated buffers with super fast Concerto that deals some damage, like Sanhua, Alto, Yang Yang, and soon to be Lumi, but also shared by hybrid sub DPS with slower Concerto that are actually meant to deal a fair bit of damage, like Yinlin, Jocha, Mortefi, and technically even Yuanwu if you fully built him. Now, Moonlit set does nothing to aid coordinated DPS deal their damage better. The most likely moment for Kuro to introduce new Co-ord Sonata sets would be with a new region, which coincidentally is next patch because, well, new map, new lore, new rules on how the world in that area works, so therefore my verdict on Yinlin is this: if you want her because it's her, by all means go ahead. But if you're considering her because of meta options, wait until the back half of her banner when there's about 2 weeks or less left when we get more news on Rinascita. Wait to see if we're getting new echo sets, something to help coordinated damage rise back. Wait to see if they can challenge dual DPS comps. And you know what? 5-piece Sonata sets usually grant about 30% element, right? Buffer outros usually gives 38% or 45% if it's a split amplify such as Yinlin. And yes, I know amplify is a final damage amp and Sonata sets are additive to damage percent. But this means numerically, Sonata 5-piece sets are usually slightly behind outros in literal numbers. Now this is interesting because Yuhu exists, and her outro grants 100% coordinated amplify. So if the trend follows the precedent, then a 5-piece coordinated damage set should give about 60 to 80 damage percent for Co-ord DPS. That's a massive damage bump. And maybe we could even get a 4 cost similar to Heron that also buffs final damage of the next unit to keep it competitive with Moonlit. Because, well, after all, if you're gonna make a Co-ord set, it needs to be best in slot for Co-ord units and better than Moonlit. Otherwise, well, you would just use Moonlit. So if something like this happens, then Co-ord units like Yinlin instantly go from second fiddle to dual DPS even in their best in slot teams like Yao to proper best in slot tied with the best dual DPS. And this is probably the outcome Kuro wants and why I suggest waiting towards the end of 1.4 patch for more info before pulling Yinlin. This would also give a more use case for Yuhu rather than just being a face tank burst healer, as she would now be comparable or possibly surpass Verity in core damage specific teams like Yinlin Yao or possibly Jinshi, but I doubt that one since so much of the damage is weighted towards Jinshi. What about Yao and Yinlin's weapons? Well, for Yao, there is no other gauntlet DPS that's good on him except Stone Art, which is paid only. Signature Verity Sandal is the only crit gauntlet otherwise, which is why it's such a big upgrade over Abyss Surges, the 5-star standard gauntlet. If you like him, I'd recommend picking it up, as it's a pretty big damage boost, roughly 20% over Abyss Surges, which is slightly bigger than normal for a signature. However, it is not needed for him to shine, as he is inherently strong enough to work even with the awkward 4-star gauntlet options. For Stringmaster from Yinlin, it is a really strong pick in general and probably the best all-purpose weapon in the game, though locked to rectifiers. And I would strongly recommend it if you're looking to get a one all-in-purpose rectifier, like I said, for future rectifier DPS and not need to worry about pulling signatures. But the only main DPS right now for rectifiers is Encore, even if it can change in the future. So you kind of need to decide in advance now if you're interested in playing more rectifier gameplay, as it's normally more ranged, sometimes cleave hit boxes. Actually, I would say Yinlin's case, where she needs to project her puppet to hit the enemies outwards, is a bit more rare, as most rectifiers immediately hit enemies with, well, Baicher being the one with the weird exception because of her summon. Anyway, Stringmaster's passive granting primarily attack percent instead of damage percent makes it universal to all DPS, or at least until we get an HP or defense scaling rectifier DPS in the future. Thank you so much for watching through this entire video. I hope this has been useful for deciding whether or not to pull on Yinlin or Yao's reruns, or even if just for their weapons. Or maybe you've decided to save for 2.0 Rinascita onwards. Either way, I wish you the best of luck on your pulls. Stay tuned for the Carlotta and Roncha guides as they release. Cheers! If this is your first time watching, feel free to leave a like or better yet subscribe. Let me know your thoughts down in the comments. Stick around if you want to see interesting videos. You don't want to miss out on any of that, do you? That'll be it for this one. Thank you all for watching and see you all next time.